My name is Nicole Bourgeois,
I'm Julie Gale,
and I teach at the middle school level in special education.
and I'm a candidate support provider. Hi, Nicole. So tell me a little bit about what you've been planning for your students.
For me, probably when I go about looking at a lesson and planning the future, I look at my overarching goal, and it's always literacy and communication. In the classroom, we've been preparing laundry lessons, and we've been working really hard on that. But for me, I want them to be able to transfer those skills into the community. I'd like to be able to take the students and visit a laundromat and go through the steps that we go through in the classroom. I know that they can identify the job task cards in the classroom, but can they take that actual clipboard with the job tasks and follow that in the laundromat? I don't know.
So as a coach here, I was like, wow, she really has thought about these goals, and she's got a lot of goals for her students. So I'm like, how am I going to bring this in for her and really narrow this down to exactly what she wants to do with these specific goals in mind? So you really want your students to be able to take these skills that they've learned in your classroom of doing laundry and now applying those skills at an actual laundromat.
Yes, yes.
So what are some things that you know about your students that you're going to need to keep in mind when you go to the laundromat?
I know that in the classroom, it's a controlled environment. I know my students, I know what they need, but then when we go out into the environment and we try to transfer those skills, there's so many variables that come up that I'm a little concerned about how I will address those things when we're at the laundromat.
As a coach, I was starting to see her get a little bit tied into some emotions here about the community, and what I wanted to do is get her to think about her successes with strategies that she's used in the past to sort of build her confidence with how she was going to move forward with this lesson. So there are some behaviors that could occur when you're at this laundromat and you know that the public's going to be there. And so you really want to be mindful of how you're going to handle those behaviors. Are there some strategies that you've used in the past when you've been out in the community that have helped you to help your students?
One of the things that I do, not only in the classroom but also in the community, I make sure that the adults that I pair with the students, the same. If I'm having that adult work with the student in the classroom and then again having that adult work with the student outside in the community environment, I'm hoping that that will decrease some of the unwanted behaviors. Did that answer your question?
I'm thinking as a coach, uh-oh, she's asking me for an answer. So I just kind of actually skipped over that and paraphrased so that she would be able to see for herself whether or not she had given the answer she was satisfied with.
I wanted the answer, but I also know that I know my students well and I know them best and I need to work through it and I needed to figure it out.
If you're successful with this lesson in the community, how will you know that?
Well, again, back to the job task cards. I know my students, and I know that when they're on a job in the future, they're always going to need pictures with text. I know that. I recognize that in regard to the literacy and communication goals, that's what they need. If they can go through that process and they can read, using their literacy goals, if they can read and identify with the picture and text those job cards and move it over, then I know that it's successful. Again, knowing my students, I do know that they are going to need some prompts, but to minimize those prompts. I'm hoping that when we're in the community, they may not need as many verbal and physical prompts. As a teacher, before this process, I didn't always know why I did what I did. And in going through this process and knowing why standards are important, I know why I do what I do. And I can articulate that to someone in the community if they do approach me with a question. What are you doing? How is this benefiting the community? I can explain to them, and I can draw from the standards, and I can draw from what my students need and what my parents' expectations are. I have a clear and concise way of thinking about what I do and why I do it.
Okay, so you want them to be able to do the task by themselves. And I remember you saying with your goal, you also wanted them to be able to communicate with the people that are working there. Where does the communication goal fit in with that?
So depending on the student, the short and long-term goals are going to be different.
Okay.
But specifically for the group that I'm thinking about now, short-term, they would be able to go in, work with each other. How are they going to communicate? They're going to communicate, again, back to the classroom. We work on sign language. Will they be able to say help? Will they be able to use their words and ask for help? Will they be able to tap that person on the arm and ask for help?
What might be some things that you have to keep in mind within yourself as your students are at the laundromat?
So I know I'm going to have to take some deep breaths. I know I'm going to have to remind myself that I know my students best. It's okay if we have to give them verbal prompts. It's okay if we have to use hand over hand, because again, going back to I know my students best, and trying not to get so wrapped up in the community and what they're thinking about my students being here. Is this a viable skill that needs to be taught? And yes, it is. Because I talk to my parents and because I know my students, this is important. These are things, life skills they need to learn to be able to move on in life.
So you really need to be mindful of your actions and how you're feeling when you're there, and know that you're doing what's best for kids, and sort of to not worry so much about what other people are thinking.
Correct. And that's sometimes a difficult task. We're exposing people to students with special needs, and I'm hoping that a long-term goal would be that we're touching some of the people in the community, and they're realizing that, they're communicating, and they just communicate differently, and oh my goodness, they are reading. They just may need pictures with their words. In this piece, I can see myself thinking about least restrictive environment, which is important for special needs students, but everyone.
So you also have a new goal of also creating that awareness within community members as to how somebody with special needs has to operate through their daily lives, and to have acceptance for them.
I know that there will be bumps and bruises, but we learn from those bumps and bruises, and since we go into the community every Wednesday, we take that information, we go back, we reassess, and then we go again. And that in itself is a lesson that we're sharing with everybody in the community, is that we keep coming back, and they see us, and hopefully they're learning from that.
So as a coach, I'm thinking, wow, I was able to move her from kind of feeling a little scared about bringing her kids into this situation and wondering what people were going to think, to now she has walked away with this empowerment that what she's doing is right, and she's also feeling good about it. And that just opens up her world for endless opportunities, really.
I have grown more as a teacher because I had to do the thinking. I had to find the answers. I had to be constantly brought back to what are my goals? What are the standards? What do my students need? That's all I have to say.